Hi there, this is Alvin, and welcome to the Kickstart Commerce podcast, where we share search marketing and domain investing strategies to help grow your business. In today's episode, our guest is Chad Burmeister, a longtime sales professional, podcaster, and founder of Scalex.ai, a pipeline as a service that solves the sales pipeline problem by combining data, digital, and dialing through artificial intelligence. Today, Chad and I discuss how mentors assisted in identifying Chad's fire in the belly gifting for sales early in life. He also shares how previous sales experience across varying industries, such as supply chain management, social recruiting, talent management, and a few others, paved the way for founding Scalex.ai. And last but not least, Chad reveals how virtual and remote selling early in his career served him well during COVID, having recently launched SalesClass.ai, the first interactive community for empowering sales professionals. So with that, Chad, welcome, and thank you for making time to join us today.
Man, great to be here. Thanks for having me, Alvin.
Yeah, so to kick things off, Chad, briefly share at a high level with our listeners a bit about yourself, who you are, your personal professional background.
Well, I've been selling for, I have to add it up every once in a while, at least 25 years, maybe 30 by now. And if you add my, before 10 days when I sold suckers on the bus, then I guess maybe even longer than that. I've always had a passion
selling from
for
the womb.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But it wasn't always natural, I have to say. You have to go through different career paths and navigate through life. You get to the end of the maze and you say, wait, there's a dead end. And you run back to this beginning and start all over again. But I started in sales at a company called Olston Staffing Services in 1995. I was going to try to add 10 years there. 1995. And that one didn't work out so well. I was there for less than a year and I thought, is sales for me? And I wanted to write a book called Is Sales for Me. And then I didn't end up writing it. But over the last 25, 30 years, I've really spent a lot of time, energy, investment, reading all the books I can read, having as many mentors as I can have. And, since then I've been sales manager, senior manager, director, senior director, vice president, senior vice president, and now finally 25, 30 years later, CEO of a company that's growing 100% year over year. No looking back.
That's awesome. Now, when you were growing up, now, did you, because for some people, they see it very early in terms of signs of what their career is likely going to be. Like what types of things did you do growing up as a child? Because for some people, it's a matter of, hey, we knew he was going to be an entrepreneur because he was doing the lemonade stand. He was out, mowing lawns, just any little way to make money. That's how a given personality was doing it. And so did you have traits like that were kind of evident from the beginning?
Yeah, mine was competitiveness. Whether it was playing ping pong with my dad or grandfather or brother, or lacrosse. First year I picked up lacrosse was my senior year of high school, made the all-star team. And it's just brute competitiveness, right? Wow. It didn't matter what it was. I always wanted to be the best that I could. So yeah, I did know early on. And then I remember going to New Zealand when I was 19, 20 years old. I did a study abroad program and there was a marketing book and, product, price, promotion, distribution. And they call it the 4 Ps. I'm like, no, it's 3 Ps and a D. I'm like, but who's tracking? And so you get to the sales chapter and I had my yellow highlighter pen and I'm like, zoop, 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 zoop. Oh. I'm like, wait a second, the entire page is yellow. And so every single trait that they outlined there from competitiveness down was exactly me. And that's when I said, all right, I got it. I got to go into sales. Now, my dad's a doctor, my brother's a doctor, and then my uncle and cousin were the sales guys of the family. So, I did have a little bit of a path that was lit up from them and they did very well with it. So I knew I could be successful because I had role models showing me the path.
Now, did you graduate from college?
Yeah, I went to Colorado State University. Then I moved to Arizona. And then after a couple years in Arizona, I moved to This is funny for listeners that are of my age. That's back when Alpine stereos were cool and there were pullouts in your car. And one night I left it in my car and someone walked off with it.
Hey, they pulled it out.
Yeah. I don't know if they had a docking station for it at the time, but they got the hardware. So
man,
it's kind of funny. But then I moved to Southern Cal and worked for, I worked for Airborne Express in Arizona first. Then I went to FedEx in Southern California, and then did my master's program at Loyola Marymount University. And it was within 5 years of undergrad graduation. And so 10 of the 18 courses actually transferred, which I had no idea that was actually possible. And luckily I made it under the wire. So I could only I only had to go half time, which was kind of nice.
So how did you get into the realm of tech?
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting story because in my MBA at Loyola Marymount, I wrote a paper comparing Fortune 1000 traditional selling to tech sales. And so I literally I grew up in a neighborhood in Colorado that's a pretty nice neighborhood. So, one of the guys I caddied for was Dick McCormick, who was the former CEO of US West. And then Larry Mueller was a CEO of Ariba. So I got to call all these behemoths and say, hey, I'm Chad, your old caddy. Do you mind if I ask you some questions? And they're all retired by this point, right? And so I said, hey, I'm looking at tech versus traditional, what do you say? And I remember the Dick McCormick was actually traveling in Europe. So it must've been 2 a.m. his time. And yet he took my call, which was really nice of him. And I asked him questions. I said, what do you think? He goes, well, let me tell you what I told my daughter. She could have been a VP at US West because she was making her way up and she'd make a good living. But she goes, he said, but she left and became a CEO of a tech company. And now she's worth multiple millions of dollars. So he said, Chad, it's actually more risky for you to stay in Fortune 1000 than it is to go into technology sales. And that's when I was like, oh, cool. Because I'm kind of conservative, but I'm also kind of a risk taker. And so I just needed that permission to take a risk. And he gave it to me.
Wow. So with that newfound, I guess you'd say approval, and actually more than approval, it's likely a commissioning, of folks that basically pointed you there. Then kind of what was that next step? How did you make the transition away from doing supply chain logistics, with FedEx and then into the tech realm?
Yeah. Super question. I went into a parallel software industry, right? I didn't just go and say, oh, I'm going to sell software that, helps you paint a house. Right. That would have been like, wait, you don't know anything about painting houses. And so I went into software that helps companies with their logistics. So I had a good background where I could say, yeah, I've got multiple years at Airborne, multiple years at FedEx with multiple promotions. So I could go into a company and talk to them about their supply chain and say, oh, there's a software that'll help you with distribution management, warehouse management, routing of trucks. So that was my first foray into it. And then I was actually poached to a competitor of that company that was also in logistics. And that's where I got to work with one of my greatest mentors of all time, who's still on my board now, Steve D'Angelo. And he had more than just transportation experience. That was actually kind of new for him. So now I got to learn from one of the best in the business how to sell traditional software, and he had my same ethical upbringing, background, and belief system. So I aligned really well with his ability to sell software, where traditional enterprise software was not really aligned to ethics, if you will.
Right.
But in today's world, it is. And Steve helped me align that.
Now, how critical was it in terms of the early part of your career to have had mentorship?
Yeah, it's at the time I didn't, I thought I was going it alone and it was brute strength and hey, I'm competitive, I got this. But looking back, I remember there was this one guy, Paul Regan, who's he looked like the comedian from Mork and Mindy. What was that guy's name?
I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name.
I am Mork from Mork.
Yes.
Yeah. So he looked just like him and he was hilarious. We'd go check into a hotel and he'd, talk to the clerk at the front and just have funny conversations. And he showed me how to organize your hard drive properly with folders, whether it's in Outlook, whether it's in just folders in your desktop. And I was like, wow, I had no idea how to do any of that. And so it turns out, he was a good mentor of mine early. And then over time, I made it a point, and this was just 2 or 3 years ago. I actually made it a point to seek out mentors in areas where I had a weakness because people are willing to give. My brother-in-law just called. He took his first management job yesterday. We spent an hour and a half on the phone. And I'm going through it and he's asking me, he had 4 core questions. And I realized, whoa, I know the answers to all those questions and they're easy. So, people are willing to give of their time and talents, and you just have to not be afraid to ask.
Gotcha. Now, what was kind of your breakout moment in terms of when you realized like, yeah, I was meant for sale? Like, what was that breakout moment? Was it the stop at WebEx on 24 or?
No, the early one was Airborne Express, which was right after Olston, where I was fired. So I went from zero to hero, as they say, literally. I never thought I'd go into, I didn't know what unemployment was. And Olston, I had to go knock on that door. And I'm like, what am I doing? I thought I was going to be an uber successful guy. And then I go to Airborne. Well, now I had the fire in my belly. The breakthrough was at Airborne. I partnered with this guy who showed me how to sell by the numbers because I was very good at math. So I'm not like, at least back in the day, I'm better at it now, but in the day I wasn't good to, sell you on emotion. I was really more of a numbers guy. So I uncovered this opportunity at U-Haul. Come to find out, they were spending a lot of money with USPS and they shipped 12,000 packages every single month to meet up with all the trucks that had expiring license plates. So they were sending out actual physical plates and it was costing them $3 per letter. Now it might take 5 days to get there with the Postal Service. And by then the truck had gone.
Right. So
10 to 20% of the time the truck was gone or they had to keep it. And so I ran through this spreadsheet and said, all right, here's what I'm understanding. You're paying $3, but you're paying it twice, 20% of the time. So that's 6. So you just have to, I ran it all in a spreadsheet. And then, what happens if someone gets pulled over with an expired tag? Oh, that's a real pain. And I'm like, oh, tell me more. And they're like, yeah, sometimes the police in the small town will actually make them bring a new U-Haul out and unload the entire load instead of just giving them a ticket and move it to another truck. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. What happens then? And you just kept peeling. But I learned all this in my selling school at 2 different companies, even the one I was fired from. Now I'm like, all right, I got 6 weeks of training. Now I know how to do this. And so I was just peeling back the pain chain. But that was the first deal that ended up putting me to number 1 in the company. And then I was like, got it. Okay. You have to be smart about it. And I'm not selling sizzle. I'm selling money. And that's where it all flipped for me.
And so then you worked your way through a number of different roles and industries, right? I mean, because you basically went from supply chain logistics. I mean, you've spent time, social recruiting, talent management, what else?
WebEx was the inflection point, the next big thing, because then I leave Descartes Systems Group. I go to one in between, AMR Research, and that helped me understand where to go and where not to go, because they analyze the markets, right? And they're like, "Don't go here." It's funny. I remember one person was like, "Oh yeah, CRM was hot for like 3 years, but don't go there." Looking back, I'm like, "Yeah, well, Salesforce did pretty good through all of that." So, maybe that was bad advice at the time, but I was able to kind of pick and choose, and collaboration was a pretty new thing with WebEx. And a friend of mine told me about it. He happened to go work there, a guy I worked with at Airborne. His name was Chad also. That taught me a lot. How do you sell virtually and remotely? And so when this pandemic hit, I've already got 10 to 15 years of selling this way.
Right.
and the rest of the world has to get caught up in a short period of time. So it's been really that was really important experience. And then I did On24, I did Riverbed Technology. I've done 3 or 4 really, really great companies over the course of the last 15 years.
And so today, I mean, you're the founder and CEO of Scalex.ai. And so, I mean, share a little bit about Scalex and what you do and what it provides.
Yeah, I did a podcast recently, and when it came out on the air, they did a really cool recap, and it said, "Hey, learn how you can do 100 hours of work in a week without working weekends and nights." And I was
That's
like,
awesome.
"Oh yeah, that lands," and that is what AI can help you do. A lot of people think AI is impersonal. A lot of people think, "Oh, I'm cheating." Well, you have a calculator, don't you? You have a telephone, you have email. So, as AI continues to get smarter and smarter, what I look at it as is I can now clone myself to send out the emails. I can clone myself to send out LinkedIn messages. I can actually talk to people on the phone more frequently because AI is helping me get conversations with people at scale. So ScaleX provides, I call it the 3Ds: data, digital outreach, and a dialing technology all combined into one. And, most companies that try to bring in those 3Ds, they're going to vendor 1, vendor 2, vendor 3, maybe more than 3. And, and then it gets really hard to integrate. And what ScaleX has done is put it all under one roof to be able to provide the solution to the client.
Interesting. So then which one of your roles just throughout your journey, like what set you up the most or the best in terms of what positioned you well to actually launch into this venture?
Well, without sales, you don't have a company. And so, going at it for the very first quarter when I sold $337,000 worth of stuff, it made it easy for me. I didn't have to go raise money and funding and, take risk with other people's money. And so it created a cushion to where I said, okay, now I can buy the company, me and the co-founder, a computer, the highest grade Mac computer you can buy. So sales is really the key. Now, in the finance side, I've never been awesome at planning your spend and your expenses. The answer has always been, oh, shoot, I owe $10,000 on that credit card. I guess it's time to sell more. And you can't really take that skill into being a CEO. You have to look yourself in the mirror. And TK Cater, the former CEO of ToutApp, helped me through that when he sent me the easy button. So now I have it on my desk, and he said, Chad, you're a good math guy. You're smart. I've met you many times. You know what you're doing. You just have to do it. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess you're right. And now looking at it in the balance sheet, profit and loss, and you do know if it's just like calories, right? If you burn 2,400 and you take in 2,000, well, 400 times 4, that's 1,600. Every 4 days, you're going to lose a pound.
Right.
And it's the same kind of math when it comes to revenue and costs. So all of the line items you could let confuse you in the profit and loss statement, but it turns out if you just drill them down and you go, oh, okay, so you're telling me there's the revenue, there's my COGS, that's the cost of goods, right, and there's my expenses, meaning sales, marketing, advertising, et cetera. And then the rest is the profit. Yep, that's pretty easy. So spend less than you make. But it's important to surround yourself with people who can help you fill those gaps. You don't have to be an expert at it out of the gate. But sales, I think, really, really was key for me to be able to launch a company and successfully run it.
Again, in terms of artificial intelligence, and so obviously it is a white hot market or industry right now. And so what went through your mind? When was the moment that you said, aha, that there's where I want to go? I want to go into this. Like, what did research lead you into this, or what really led into this?
Yeah, I'd call it primary research because it was my ring central position. I'd been running quota carrying sales teams, and I didn't really want to relinquish that because now I'm on the revenue side of the coin.
Correct.
And, why would I want to go run a team of quote unquote admins? And I moved to Ring Central and took on the SDR BDR team. Well, that's harder to measure revenue with, right? It's pipeline, it's MQL to SQL conversion rates. And so I went in and I did my normal thing. Within the first 90 days, I moved the conversion rate of their leads from 8% to 18%.
How so?
And I was like, man, this is great, because guess what? That means we're going to more than double revenues, like 1.5, 150, 200% more. But I realized very quickly that, well, that department is looked at as a administrative role. Oh yeah, those are leads. The company already paid for them. You're just making them a little more efficient. And I was like, wait a minute, I only got to send one person out of my entire 50 people at the time. Then we grew to 100. Then they said, okay, now you can send 2. Well, the quota carrying team could send 1 out of 10 reps to President's Club.
Wow.
I'm like, hold on. Like, these guys are busting their butt. Some people are at 1,000 dials a day using technology. I don't understand. Just because someone else is doing so, I couldn't get my arms around it. Yeah, it blew my mind. And so we changed that over time, right? I crashed some gongs and cymbals and said, hey, we gotta have more than 1 or 2 people for an entire department of 100. But what I learned there in running that department is that a lot of what the reps did nowadays, they've figured out how to get efficient and smart with, I'll just push this one button and 50 emails go out. And they tend to stray away from the hard work, which is actually having empathy-based conversations on the telephone, because it's easier to just push the send all button. Right. And so what I discovered is, you know what, we as humans, we're going to always tend towards the laziest thing we can do. And so I said, I'm going to build AI and software that can actually solve for those monotonous, low value added tasks. And then I'd rather have my team actually selling on the phone. So I recognized it. And that was honestly my purpose of going there, was to figure out, what does the SDR BDR department need in today's world to make them more efficient? And then that's what I found out, is that AI could actually handle 70 to 80% of the work they do. And by the way, do it better than they would do it otherwise. And let's put the human on what the human does well, which is having sales conversations and not pulling data and sending email blasts. Doesn't make sense.
So it's really not that you eliminated work per se, because it's not like, I just hit the on button and just kick back and relax. I'm still working, but it's more of a focused effort.
Yeah, it's still
area.
a same size or bigger sales team. They're just able to cover more ground. So I went to AI conferences for much of 2018 and 19, like 6 or 8 of them, unrelated to sales. And there would be speakers on the main stage, including that robot, the first citizen of America that's a robot. I was like, whoa, wait. I was 20 feet away from this person with no legs. Not person, sorry, robot with no legs. They had to pick her up and then she could talk to people. It was really weird. But seeing that was at those events, there would be a speaker. One really stuck out, and he showed the productivity and the job. So he showed, here's the growth of jobs, and it's kind of up and to the right, and then it starts to taper off, and then it shows revenue per head, and the line in the sand starts to graduate to a level where you're like, wait a minute, you're telling me you need far fewer people to deliver far greater amounts of revenue. So if you think about, what does that mean for the world? And you say, at one point, God put it on my mind, wouldn't it be neat to solve world hunger? And I was like, wait a minute. As I start attending some of these conferences and seeing these smart speakers, you're like, wait a second. You can do so much with so little now. There's probably a time that actually you can make those kinds of moves. And I'm like, and seeing what's going on in 2020, I'm like, I'll bet you there's some big scheme going on that's way above our pay grade that actually might help solve that problem. And I'm like, I'm just going to have faith in God that that's what's actually going on under the hood here, but we'll see what happens.
Exactly. So you launched Scalex. Like, how did you come up with the name?
That's funny. It's a good story. I bought Scale.ai without the X, and I bought it twice, and it's like $200 for a .ai.
Wait. How'd you buy it twice?
Because the first company said, "Oh yeah, it's not available," and I'm like, "No, it is. I just bought it from you, and I paid you money." And then I went to another company, Scale.ai, bought it again. They're like, "Oh, sorry, it's not actually available." I think it was probably an automated system. It probably was available. And then it got to a human that needed to say, why would we let this really neat URL go for $200? And so finally I'm like, what am I going to do? And I'd already got my logo. And so I was like, all right, I worked for FedEx. I worked for WebEx. I guess I got to create ScaleX. That's how I added the X.
Interesting. And then how did you find out about .ai? I mean, obviously you were at that moment in time, likely scouring the world in terms of artificial intelligence. So AI was kind of already there in your, in the nomenclature that you were accustomed to, but did you realize that there was an extension for it or no?
Yeah, if I were to go to Scalex.com, it's already taken. So when you go into 1&1 or GoDaddy or whatever site you're buying your domain from, it'll often say, "Oh, we've got .io, .gov, .co," and that's when I kind of realized, oh, wait, there's this .ai. It turns out AI stands for some foreign country. It's not really artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it's like Anguilla.
I think it's Anguilla. I've always thought, it's Anguilla. You're exactly
I think it's
right.
Anguilla, which is interesting because a lot of times country code top level domains or CCTLDs, as most of the listeners, domain investors likely know it to be, are repurposed. And in this case, obviously .ai is being repurposed, and it seems like more and more companies like yourself are shifting away from the .com into the, .ai. So
yeah, now I still have a .com. It's kind of funny on certain sites when you go to subscribe, just like Yahoo or Google, they kind of, they look at that as a personal. And so they block it. Every 1 in 50 or something, I'll go in and I'll say Scalex.ai. And the subscription site says, "Please enter a valid URL." I'm like, yeah, that's mine. That is valid. So we own SalesClassai.com as well.
And now how long did it take? Did you purchase both of those at the same time, or was there a bit of lag?
No, there was a lag. We got the AI.com one about a year or two later, funny enough.
And what made you go after it?
Well, we were actually going to set up a Gmail account for some of our customer campaigns and our own internal campaigns. So when we moved, rather than moving our entire Scalex.ai over from Outlook to Gmail, I decided, you know what, let's just have both. That's how we opened the second one.
Interesting. So you have Scalex.ai. Now you also, I guess you just launched this year, what was it, SalesClass.ai?
Yeah, that was a fun launch. That was definitely came out of the lockdown era, which hopefully, knock on wood, will be coming out of at some point.
Yeah. And so what made you actually do that? Right in the throes of COVID.
Well, if you remember, my first job I was let go from. So now that I'm in a position where I've got a CRO, I have a sales team, and I'm doing more of the marketing and CEO leading activities, I've got a little more bandwidth to do other things. So this was an opportunity to pull together sales content, sales training for the masses. And it's what's neat is we originally were selling it for $10 a month access. At some point during the lockdown, we said, what if we just made it free for anyone who wants to log in and register? And then we have some small sponsor packages for the speakers who want to do webinars through us and everything. So we shifted the model to where, if you want to access the 2,500 on-demand videos and the dozens of live trainings we have every month, you just log in, sign up for an account, and you can have unlimited access forever.
And what types of trainings, are we talking about in terms of? I mean, is it all sales focused? I'm assuming that it is.
Mainly, however, there's some mindset classes in there because if you don't have the right mindset, especially in today's world, you're going to get trampled.
Right.
So you got to have a good mindset. There's management classes, leadership, negotiations. So it definitely sways toward sales. So if you're a marketer, you might get 20% of the value. But from a sales perspective, whether you're an entry level, mid level, or senior leader, you can get value out of SalesClass.ai.
Gotcha. I asked that because in terms of some of the listeners being domain investors, domain brokers, developers, and the like, and especially with the investors and the brokers, there, like in any business, and like you gave with the calories there, it's one of those things of, hey, you can't really spend all your time just buying. Or if you do, you better be buying top shelf things that are going to be able to be turned, flipped for revenue.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the things I look at and say, like you said, sales it's a mindset. Like you've got to, it's not gonna do itself. So you've got to basically get up and grind pretty much every day, or learn rather what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, work in those areas of strength, and then get coverage for the areas of weakness. And so likely is the case, does that Sales Class AI provide something like that for domain investors, brokers, or just sales in general?
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely say check it out. It's no cost. So what's neat about it, it is powered by AI. So you go in and it's going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10 in negotiations, let's say, how are you feeling? And it's for this week. So you say, you know what? I'm a 2 this week. Then it'll say first for leadership, 1 to 10. You could say I'm a 10. I'm already a leader. I'm good. So depending on how you answer those 8 or 9 questions on the sliding scale, it serves up the podcasts, the webinars, the live class, everything gets served up based on how you answer it. So it's truly a Netflix for sales content model. And anything that's not relevant for you based on how you answer those questions, those won't get served up to you. So it's a pretty neat little app. And yeah, I think it'd be valuable for any of your listeners.
Interesting. Then in terms of Scalex, like what's your vision for Scalex?
Well, we just rolled up our first technology company that we acquired about a week and a half ago, and it's AI for account-based selling. So we plan to do a lot more of that as we continue to double every year. You build a market cap, you've got a clean set of sellers. I've got a CRO in place. We've got CRM. Like I feel like we're Remax, if you will.
Right.
And I suspect when Remax started, the son went to my school. In fact, Chuck Liniger was in my grade, and his dad, I think Dave Liniger, did very well. And Chuck ended up being a pilot and moved to Memphis, I think is where he was last I heard. But, Remax came out and I'm sure they acquired a handful of companies early on, and now they're very well known, probably the biggest in the world. So I think we can do something similar. You go find a certain technology, you sell it under a white label. And after you say, this one company, we sold 250,000 in sales of their product. They sold 50. And we said, we sold 5 times more than them. So why shouldn't we just roll the company into our company? And that's what we did. And I think we'll be able to do that over and over again until we're why not be $100 million company?
Right. Right. So then, for some of the listeners that may not kind of grasp, I guess, in terms of what Scalex does. So kind of walk us through an example of if Alvin Brown were to go and enter into a relationship with Scalex, like what does that look like in terms of me? Let's just say if I'm trying to reach Fortune 1000, Fortune 100 companies in terms of trying to sell domains, what could that look like using Scalex?
Yeah, the core product is called Scalex Social Selling Platform. And what you do is go in and you buy a navigator seat, a LinkedIn navigator seat. And then our team helps you build out an advanced search to find the right companies. Now, you may already have that skill set. And so, you could either leverage our team or do it yourself. Our platform allows for full service or self-service. And so you build this navigator search. Well, now you copy that search algorithm into our app. Then our application pulls in all of those contact records, up to 2,500 at a time. And then you create a series of messages through our application that will be sent as you, or I've even done virtual assistants. So you could say, Alyssa Brown is my virtual assistant. So Alyssa sends out notes on my behalf to these top execs. Hey, Alvin asked me to reach out to you. Looks like you're the CEO and founder of company ABC. And then you could actually, there's mail merge tags. So you could say, we own the, I thought you might be interested in SalesClassai.com because I see you own Scalex.ai. And so you could automate those messages as long as you've got a table, like an Excel table that shows here's the company name and then here's the matching domain that we own. If you're only selling, 5 or 10 of them, no problem. Copy, paste, send the email. But if you're doing this at scale, then, you could reach out through automation on LinkedIn and just sell a heck of a lot more than you could otherwise. So that's kind of the core product. It's $500 a month for a user. You'll get much more than 500 out of it. The company we bought is much more AI centric. And so in that case, you say, look, these are the 500 companies, HP, IBM, maybe it's the biggest companies in the world. If I could just get into those, I'd be set. Well, instead of going direct to the decision maker, they're getting hammered every day by email, social, phone calls, et cetera.
Right.
In that case, we tell you who the influencers are in your network, first and second. So for every 1,000 first connections, you have 1 million second connections. Our AI within 10 minutes will go in and tell you, here's the 500 people that or that are your second connections who could get you a meeting with the VP of HP, for example. And then we email those influencers and say, hey, Alvin asked me to it would be from you actually. So it'd say, hey, Chad, I see you're connected to the CEO of Zoom Video. Would you mind making an intro to Eric Yuan? And if you came to me and the AI and you asked me that, I'd say, yeah, sure, no problem. I used to work with Eric when I was at WebEx, and he'd take a meeting. So we automate all that through AI and email outreach is the other product.
Interesting, because when I think about that, I think in terms of if you're selling domains in the area of, let's say, $5,000 or less, it may or may not serve you well. But if you are selling domains $5,000 or more, and likely is the case, because when I think about the time that it takes me to look through, let's say if you have a portfolio of 1,000 or more domains, likely is the case. I mean, it would take me forever, and who knows really what the time would be to work through those 1,000 domains, sending emails, contacting people, and then just trying to stay organized with it all. Versus Scalex could come in and basically, I guess, I'm feeding it domains, but I guess I'm also setting keywords or some sort of trigger to basically, kind of give some sort of context around what the domain is and who that audience is, the target audience. And from there, you're basically able to kind of, like, as you said, do the 60 to 70% of the work in terms of reaching out, making initial connections, and really, I'm only basically filling the hopper with more domains, as well as coming back to those who basically say, hey, we're interested in we're ready to enter into, a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And, with Calendly and these calendar tools these days, you can just put a link in your outreach that says, here, schedule time with me. So when I come in every day to work, my calendar is usually booked all the way cover to cover. And it's not from me making phone calls, right? When I started 3 years ago, I was driving 300 dials a day myself using automation. Over time, that becomes less necessary. because now I have all these other automation tools that can help me get meetings without having to do that. Remember, we said humans will generally gravitate towards what's easy, and AI is a lot easier than doing a cold call. That's for sure.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, you hit on it in terms of leveraging, harnessing the power of technology. And so without it, there's only so much you're going to do, and the human side of us will burn out. That's not the case with technology. It's just a matter of it'll be there doing what it does all day, but then it's the human side of it. Do you have the ability to keep up with it?
Yep, that's right. I mean, it does. It's wild. There's a tipping point. I talked to a guy recently with a company called Weka.io, and he's the CRO, and he's helped companies go public, get acquired, made a lot of people a lot of money. And he tells it how it is. And he came into this call the other day, and it was a sales call, right? And he said, Chad, he likes to drop F-bombs from time to time. So he's just dropping F-bombs. He's like, here's how it is. He goes, we have, I want to say 11 quota-carrying salespeople and 40 technical solution engineers. And then a bunch of SDRs. And he said, look, I want to have fewer quota carrying reps with a higher quota whose calendars are packed all day long. It's better to do that than go hire a team of 50 or 100 sellers, right? Why not have better people at the tip of the spear? And everyone else's job is to, this is we have a friend of the family who's in the Marines, and he just came over a few days ago. And he said, there's only 11% of the Marines are infantrymen. And he was pretty proud of that. He's infantry, right? And he said, oh, yeah, all these other people are logistics and this and that and the other. And there's only 11% of us. And that's how I look at the sales of the future, is that you're either one of the 11% or you're back up to the 11%. And a lot of companies do it wrong. They go hire 100% infantrymen. And it's like, no, you've got to have the person who has the ability to wear the Iron Man suit, because not everyone can wear the Iron Man suit.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just hearing you say that, it makes me think about sales organizations or just organizations in general that have sales teams or a sales function of, it's almost, I equate it to gambling or playing the lottery to a certain extent, because, people will often say, hey, I can sell, I can do this, I can do that. And I'm like, yeah, well, here's where the rubber meets the road is actually, can you do it? Can you deliver? And so it's almost a bit of playing numbers to a certain extent when you start going out just hiring large, sales organizations, or people within the sales organization. I look at it and go, well, you're willing to make an investment for how many months before you expect a return. And so that's very, that just, it's a vivid illustration for me of just seeing folks, I'll put 6 on this, I'll put 7 on this, the
military knows, right? They've invested countless decades in figuring this stuff out.
Yeah.
So the fact that Andrew knows it's 11%, I remember Ken Krogh at InsideSales.com. He was a military strategist. And so then he's co-president of InsideSales.com. And he was very much about role specialization. And, now it all comes back. Got it. That's why there's role specialization. You can get far more efficient. So, and then my brother-in-law calls, and he's with Cisco. And he said, Chad, I want some advice. What do I do? And they're geography focused. And he goes, yeah, some guys get 20 leads a week. Others get 2. I was like, it's set up to fail.
Right.
I mean, and unless you say, all right, I'm going to put my C player in the 2 lead a week to start, and then they need to show that they can close a higher percent, and then we'll get them into the heavy seat. That's okay, but it's not efficient. I'd rather have a team of 10 instead of 30 people that are amazing closers and just feed them the same number of meetings, all of them every day. So there's just models that have been put in place for decades, and it's very, very hard for companies that are like that to get out of their own way and revisit.
But Scalex is likely upending companies like that operate like that.
Yeah. And COVID helped upend, to be honest. There's so many companies who've been doing it a certain way, and they're just looking in the mirror going, wait a second, we got to refigure this. And so my CRO called it really well the other day. He said, pipeline before people. Like if you're hiring people back, okay, hold on, so let's slow play this. We don't know, this UK stuff might come out with, a new strain, and who knows what's going to happen. So why go hire your team of all these people back if you could hire Iron Man wearing people on our side of the fence and then over deliver and then decide if you want to bring in the Iron Man suit and suit up your sales team with it.
And so you believe that it's forever transfigured then just how sales operates.
Yeah. I really, just look at Zoom stock price, look at Ring Central stock price. I just invested in another company called ViewStub that does remote, physical and virtual combined events, or all virtual, whatever you want to do. And they don't charge you for the software. They only charge you on the back end of ticket sales. So all these new companies that are doing remote, virtual, it's not going to go away. Physical conferences, they'll come back someday, but they'll have twice as many people viewing from remote than they did in the past.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point because, like you said, in-person or physical conferences will come back, but I also believe that there is a bit of a hybrid approach that really now is kind of that underpinning, that foundation now of, I don't know that conferences really get the option anymore of totally dismissing online. It's kind of like you're going to have a hybrid situation, looks like, from this day forward.
Yeah, 100%. I attended one recently where we were physical and there was twice as many people virtual. And when I met with some of those people after this big meeting, it was a 4-day thing in Sarasota, Florida. And then I did one-on-ones with people, and I could have sworn I met this guy live. And he goes, no, I was in Canada. I was on the video. I'm like, what? That's so confusing. I thought you were there. And that's how it is. You want it to feel like they're there, but they're really not.
Exactly. So then wrapping up, what would be your advice to someone that's starting their journey into sales and, wanting to try to get a good place, a good jump in terms of where to start? Like, where should they begin?
Well, first read books. My favorite book of all time is The Greatest Salesman in the World. And it's the 10 scrolls that are passed down from this one guy to the next guy, right?
Yeah.
And if you read those, I will treat each day as if it were my last. There's all these lessons in there. And then there's a series, The Richest Man in Babylon,
right?
Tells you how to save money, put it to work. Like and you can read this in 45 minutes, the entire book. So
yeah, it's a quick and easy read. Because I have 3 out of the series, but yeah, one of the prominent domain investors, Rick Schwartz, that's one of the books that he swears by it, and so he says it's every domain investor, domain broker, or any person in sales, and he spent a good 30 or more years doing sales, and that was one of the things that he certainly brings out is his book.
Well, it's funny. I was on the podcast. The guy who put out The Greatest Salesman in the World podcast now, he owns the rights to the movie.
Oh, nice.
And I'm looking at it going, man, I'd love to get some of the people that I know that are the best sellers in the world to play characters in that movie, even though they're not necessarily actors.
Right.
I would love to have at least some cameos, show up in that. But yeah, that's a great one. And then check out SalesClass.ai. It's free. If you're not getting value out of it, don't log back in, but I think you'll find some tremendous value. It's
right.
Like Vengresso is on there, Sandler Sales Training, all of their training videos are on there.
Nice.
It's pretty wild that we're able to pull that off and bring some of the best of the best content.
Now, looking through my notes, I also see Sales Advisor. Is that something different, SalesAdvisor.ai or?
SalesAdvice.ai.
SalesAdvice.ai.
Yeah, that's another domain. So here's something for you guys that are doing domain sales. Check this out. You could go to companies with this idea, and I'm sure nobody else has done this. So there's third-party companies that you can go to, like Technology Advice, Software Advice, and they're G2 Crowd, right? They're third parties that show here's all the competitors in the space. Or you can create your own third party site. So Sales Advice has 5 of my competitors listed, but I own it. I own the traffic. I own the AdWords. If someone fills out the form, it goes to my team. Now, we do share information about our competitors, but it's how I want to share the information. It's not how a third-party website would share the information. So you could go to a company and say, whatever it is, aerospaceadvice.com or .ai.com, whatever you want to build, and go help them build that site even. Hey, we'll help you source the name of the site, and then we'll help you launch it, and then list the competitors, and that becomes a lead magnet for those sites. Gotcha.
Now, how many domains do you have? Because counting through this, it was like Scalex.ai, SalesClass.ai, Sales Advice.
I've got at least 30, maybe more. ChadBurmeister.com, HaroldSchilling.com, Schillings.com, Burmeisters.com. I mean, you want to own your personal stuff as well as your company domains. And yeah, so my funniest one was TristaandRyan.com. You remember the first Bachelorette?
Wait, how did you get it?
Well, my sister actually had a crush on Ryan when we were on a cruise ship, when they were, my sister's 12 years younger than me. And then when I saw him come on the show, I was like, wait, Lindsay, that was the guy you had a crush on. and so, he's down to the top 3 candidates on the show. And I'm like, you know what? He's going to get picked. And it's not going to be Ryan and Trista.com. She's the one that's in the front of this end. So I bought TristaandRyan.com, and that I pointed it at one of my business sites at the time, and it took it down because it had so much traffic that next day. So
wow. And whatever happened to the name?
I must have put it back in the pool. I tried to give it over to them because I hung out with Ryan on that cruise a little bit. Wow. If I go to it right now, it's just sitting there. So maybe someone could buy it.
Oh man, knowing listeners, I know people have probably already hit pause and they're over there pecking away at the keyboard.
Have a GoDaddy page here pretty soon.
Exactly. Well, last but not least, is there anything else that you'd like to share with listeners, how they may get in contact with you, or just how to get involved in terms of Scalex?
Yeah, for sure. They can certainly reach out to me directly, Chad@Scalex.ai, and check out the website. We've got some pretty cool videos and client testimonials, and lots and lots of companies are trying us out, and once they try it, it's very hard to put down. So it's like 110% renewal rate, which is kind of nice.
That is awesome. Well, Chad, with that, we're out of time. So thank you again for joining us today and, sharing your entrepreneurial and sales experience.
Alvin, thanks for having me. Great to catch up.
Certainly. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Kickstart Commerce, where we share search marketing and domain name strategies to help grow your business. Please subscribe to this podcast via iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or Podbean. Last but not least, please visit kickstartcommerce.com to subscribe to the newsletter sharing tips and tricks about the disciplines of digital strategy. Thanks, and that's all for now.